October 13, 2018. Karli Guse. 16-year-old female Karli Guse was last seen at her father and stepmother's home before dawn on the morning of October 13, 2018. Karli lived in the White Mountain Estates area of Chalfin Valley in Mono County, California, a rural mountain town nestled between the Inyo National Forest and the Nevada border, approximately a 5-hour drive north from Las Vegas and 4 hours south from Reno. Many of the questions surrounding Karli's disappearance began the night before, when she stormed out of a party she was attending with her boyfriend and some friends. The original police report stated that Karli may be disoriented, a comment later explained by her stepmother, Melissa Guse, who said Karli admitted to smoking marijuana that night. Melissa claimed she received a frantic call from Karli to be picked up at the party, only to arrive and to find her stepdaughter nowhere. After a search, she found Karli running down a dark road, almost a mile from the party. When she got in the car, Melissa claimed Karli seemed paranoid and anxious. Back home, her stepmother tried to calm her nerves and spent the night with her in the same room, where the teenager remarked she was afraid to go to sleep because she would be killed. In a final text to her boyfriend, Karli mentioned she believed the marijuana may have been laced. Karli was last seen laying awake in her bed by her stepmother around 5:30 a.m. It's unclear exactly when Karli left the room or why, but when Melissa woke up at 7 that morning, Karli had vanished, leaving behind her personal belongings, including her cell phone. Karli lived in a town of 650 people, so anyone walking around would definitely stand out. 2 witnesses reported seeing a girl wearing gray sweatpants or jeans, a white t-shirt, and Vans brand shoes walking through the neighborhood between 6:30 and 7:30 that morning. Another witness reported seeing a young woman matching Karli's description a mile from her home, walking south near Highway 6, a remote desert highway, at approximately 7:30 a.m. Despite several searches of the area, including with dogs and helicopters, no clues were found to indicate the whereabouts of the wandering teenager. After several months, her case went cold. Some people, including Karli's birth mother, have claimed inconsistencies with the police investigation and her stepmother's story, and they believe both her and Karli's father are covering something up. As evidence, they point to a recording Melissa made of a rambling Karli that night after the party and a text exchange between Melissa and Karli's boyfriend the morning she went missing. To date, no one has been charged with any crimes. At one point, some people believed they had seen Karli on a YouTube channel as an abused-looking girl named Kate, being held captive, possibly for ransom. After authorities looked into the girl in the videos, it was determined it was not her. So what did happen to Karli Guse? Did she overdose at home and was it covered up? Or did she leave the house as the witnesses claim and then was abducted while walking near Highway 6? Possibly still disoriented from whatever narcotics she had been exposed to. Or is there another explanation that no one has come forward with yet? If you have any information on the whereabouts of Karli Guse, contact the Mono County Sheriff's Office or give an anonymous tip online at tips.fbi.gov. March 5th, 2011. Marizela Perez. Female Marizela Perez was last seen on March 5th, 2011 in Seattle, Washington. The afternoon she disappeared, the 18-year-old freshman was on her way back to the University of Washington campus from the Rainier Beach home she lived in with her aunt, uncle, and cousin. Born in the Philippines, Marizela grew up in New Jersey, but embraced life in her new home in Seattle. Perez was described by her college friends and family as an upbeat person and dedicated student who brought her creativity, love of art, and sense of style to wherever she went. The last confirmed sighting of Marizela was a stop to a Safeway grocery store in the University District. She bought orange juice, trash bags, Tylenol, and over-the-counter sleeping medication. Marizela left the store and headed north into an area known for its population of transient street people. These stills taken at 2:19 p.m. from the Safeway surveillance cameras are the last known images of Marizela. As she walked towards campus to study with friends, Marizela received a text at 2:45. After that, all contact with her phone went dead. By later that evening, when Marizela failed to return home or alert her family that she would be late, they became instantly concerned. Their fear grew as phone calls, texts, emails, and social media messages all went unanswered. Marizela had recently been through a traumatic breakup with her boyfriend of 6 years, and her parents were concerned that she was in an unstable frame of mind. She had also been suffering from depression for some time and was taking medication when she vanished. A private investigator hired by the family believed Marizela took her own life, but her parents weren't convinced, citing that she had seemed happy in the days prior to her disappearance. Marizela had her laptop with her when she vanished, so when activity appeared on her instant messenger account 2 weeks later, it raised more questions. Was it her? Or had someone stolen or found the laptop and was using it? Some observers of the case have speculated that the sleeping aids and trash bags Marizela purchased could have been used in a suicide attempt, although others doubt this method would have worked. Marizela's body was never recovered, nor were any of the items with her that day. With no evidence of a crime, police were unable to get a warrant for Marizela's laptop and cell phone records. Without those records, it remains unknown if she had contact with someone that day who may hold vital information on her movements. And without her internet searches, it's impossible to determine if she had looked into suicide or had other unknown intentions. Further complicating the issue is the fact Marizela was known to spontaneously explore the city, and it wasn't unusual for her to disappear for a few hours. Perhaps she had explored somewhere and fallen into a hole or ravine where her body was lost, or she may have been abducted. On the 8th anniversary of her disappearance, Marizela's family and friends continue to hold out hope she will be found. But without the information from her laptop and phone, there have been desperately few leads to follow. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Marizela Perez, contact the Seattle Police Department. September 20, 2017. Corinna Slusser. 19-year-old female Corinna Slusser was last seen on September 20th, 2017 in Queens, New York. A small-town girl from Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, Corinna had dreams of the big city and an even bigger future. Unfortunately, the bright lights of Gotham can turn dark, and people and promises aren't always what they seem. A cautionary tale from hell, it took only a few months for this restless teenager to go from chasing her dreams to living a nightmare. For small-town cheerleader and aspiring makeup artist Corinna Slusser, the end of senior year couldn't come fast enough. Earlier in 2017, Corinna had attempted suicide and was severely depressed, but after recovering, she began to bury her pain with a new interest: partying. As tensions grew with her mother at home and fed up with school, the teen was desperate for an exit. In a stunning move, Corinna dropped out of high school one class shy of graduation and moved in with friends in a neighboring town. That July, Corinna met 32-year-old Giovanni Peguero, who enticed her with an offer to live in New York City rent-free. Eager for the fresh start, Corinna left for New York with only the clothes on her back, a cell phone, and IDs. Initially surprised by her sudden departure, Corinna's mother and friends reported she seemed fine during regular phone calls, and her social media posts showed off her new apartment. But life in the big city wasn't what she bargained for, and it soon became obvious that Giovanni wasn't a friend. He was a violent pimp. On August 25th, 2017, while living in a seedy hotel, Corinna called 911 to report Peguero had stolen money from her and choked her when she demanded it back. The incident led to an order of protection for Corinna, with a copy being mailed to her mother's address, prompting a call to her daughter, who downplayed the incident, saying everything was fine. A few weeks later in September, Corinna's grandfather passed away. Originally planning to attend the funeral in Florida, Corinna canceled last minute, claiming her IDs had been stolen and she was unable to fly. But she promised her mother she would be in Pennsylvania when she returned. It was during the period of the funeral and the following week that Corinna's mother, still in Florida, lost contact with her daughter. Even worse, she returned home to an empty house. With no way to contact her daughter and no idea of her whereabouts, Corinna was reported missing. A few days later, police confirmed an anonymous tip that Corinna was seen leaving a Queens hotel known for prostitution and drugs early in the morning of September 20th, 2017. That was the last time anyone would see or hear from Corinna Slusser. A fan of social media, over her time in New York, Corinna's posts became increasingly sexual, with her appearing thinner and often in skimpy clothing. The last post on Corinna's Instagram has left many people confused. Dated September 10th, it's unclear if the photo is of Corinna, another girl, or even a man. There's also been speculation that the photo was taken in South America. Many believe Corinna did not make this post. The trail to find Corinna ran cold for over a year until November 2018, when NYPD arrested 23-year-old Ishi Woni for sex trafficking and exploitation of young women throughout the New York region. In his trial, it was revealed Woni prostituted Corinna until just before his arrest, along with other young women, including a minor and a disabled woman with a third-grade IQ. He even used Corinna in online ads. A year later, in November 2019, Woni was found guilty and sentenced to 15 years in prison. In a heartbreaking end to the trial, Corinna's mother asked the convicted pimp to his face what happened to her daughter. Shocking the court, Woni gave her a reply. He said he never passed her off to anybody, and that he had no idea if she was dead or alive, but hoped she was alive. Corinna first met Woni after the 911 call against Peguero in August 2017. She moved to a seedy hotel in the Bronx with Woni and several other women who worked for him. This arrangement is what likely prevented her from going to her grandfather's funeral that September. Investigators found over 800 text messages between Corinna and Ishi over a 10-day period between September 10th and 20th, 2017. Eventually, jealousy led to an altercation between Corinna and other women staying with Ishi, so she left alone for a hotel in Rego Park, Queens, the same hotel she was last seen at on September 20th, less than 3 months after she had first come to New York. Investigators believe Corinna is still alive and continues to be under the control of human traffickers. If she is still on the East Coast, she may be working a known business corridor along the I-95 highway from Maine to Florida, with stops at brothels, hotels, and casinos. She could also be appearing in ads for escort services along that route. In reality, though, she could be anywhere, including overseas, with some speculating she may have been smuggled out in a shipping container. So what happened to Corinna Slusser? Was she harmed in retribution for calling 911? Or has she been lost in the shuffle of human trafficking, sold and resold, passed from pimp to pimp? Or is Corinna living her life somewhere and simply choosing not to contact her family? Corinna has a very distinctive flower tattoo on her sternum, as seen in this provocative photo from her social media. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Corinna Slusser, call NYPD's Crime Stoppers hotline, the FBI, or leave an anonymous tip online at tips.fbi.gov. June 22nd, 2013. Brooklyn, Farthing. 18-year-old female Brooklyn Farthing was last seen on June 22, 2013, in Berea, Kentucky. An overnight bag with plans to sleep at a friend's house turned on its head, as Brooke is left stranded at a party and then at the isolated home of a male stranger. Ominous texts and a suspicious fire have investigators almost certain the young woman was taken against her will. For recent high school graduate Brooke Farthing, life in Berea, Kentucky was good. She was described by her sister as a spunky, tell-you-how-it-is, lovable person who loved animals and the outdoors. The day before her disappearance, Brooke had passed her driving test and was having a great visit with her grandfather and family, with more family plans for the weekend. The evening prior to her disappearance, Brooke attended a house party with her cousin and sister, who quickly left, and had plans to crash that night with one of her girlfriends. During the course of the party, Brooke had a falling out with her girlfriend, who wanted to hang out with a guy that night instead, so the sleepover plans were nixed. Stranded and desperate at the party house with no ride home, Brooke was seen helping an intoxicated friend when they both accepted a ride from an older male, Josh Hensley, who claimed to be friends with an ex-boyfriend of Brooke's. Allegedly, the trio went to look at some horses before dropping off the third party, eventually returning to Josh's foreclosed home in Berea. Once at the secluded house, Brooke ignored the lack of power and water and busily worked her phone, desperate to get a relative or friend to pick her up. Finally, an ex-boyfriend who worked the night shift agreed to come by around 7 a.m. At 4:26 that morning, Brooke sent him a text that had an ominous request. "Please hurry, I'm scared." At 5:30 a.m., her ex received another text from Brooke's phone. "Never mind, I'm okay. I'm going to a party in Rockcastle County." Although it was odd that Brooke would drive 25 minutes at 5:30 in the morning to go to a party, her ex read the text and skipped on picking her up. The Rockcastle party text, which investigators and family believe was not sent by Brooke, began a bizarre series of events which still remain unexplained. Josh claims he left Brooke that morning sitting on the couch smoking a cigarette as he went to check on some horses at a local farm. When Josh returned at 7 a.m., he claimed Brooke was gone, and even more sinister, the couch she had been sitting on was engulfed in flames. The strong fire had burnt the couch and floor and was identified as suspicious by investigators. Brooke and her phone were gone, but left behind on the front porch was her purse, cowboy boots, and the overnight bag. Was Brooke waiting outside on the porch to leave, get picked up, or just to get away from inside the house and whoever was in there? Her family believes she wouldn't have left without her belongings, and that she had no reason to run away. Brooke's phone last pinged just minutes away from Josh's foreclosed home in the Blue Lick Road area of Berea. During that first 24 hours, Brooke's phone would receive over 1,000 calls. It hasn't been released how many, if any, were from Josh. Multiple extensive searches, including with divers and cadaver dogs, canvassed over 16,000 acres in 3 counties. One search included 200 volunteers and covered a 1.5-mile radius around Josh's home. The secluded and remote area Brooke was last seen in is notoriously difficult to traverse, with thickly wooded terrain, steep inclines, caves, sinkholes, abandoned wells, and multiple bodies of water, all crisscrossed by interconnected country lanes. Based on the facts of the case made public by investigators, many observers believe Josh, the last known person to see Brooke, knows more about her disappearance than he claims. Could a small-town cover-up be in play, or does law enforcement know exactly what happened, but lack the evidence to prosecute a case? Or were there other people involved, possibly living in the foreclosed home, who could have acted as an accomplice? Is it possible that when Josh went to see the horses, he was actually taking Brooke somewhere, leaving the cigarette to burn down the couch? Josh was never charged in Brooke's disappearance, but in August 2020, Josh Hensley was arrested by Kentucky State Police with 2 other men from Berea for possession of child pornography. The arrest was not connected with Brooke, though. Brooke's case is still open and active. It is considered suspicious, and criminal involvement is suspected. Farthing's nickname is Brooke. She has pierced ears and a birthmark on her left hip. She was last seen wearing a gray t-shirt with the Madison County FFA, Future Farmers of America logo, and light blue denim shorts. This case has been the topic of small-town gossip, so investigators are asking the public for facts and actionable info, not rumors. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Brooklyn Farthing, please call the Kentucky State Police or email her family at findbrookeky@gmail.com. May 15th, 2010. Jackson Miller. 19-year-old male Jackson Alexander Miller was last seen on May 15, 2010, in San Francisco, California. Soon after his disappearance, Jackson's 2004 Honda Pilot was found in a parking lot by the Golden Gate Bridge. Inside were his wallet, iPod, and cell phone. But no Jackson. The car's location was a devastating clue, suggesting an open and shut case. Leading up to his disappearance, Jackson's mental health had been in a downward spiral. He suffered from anxiety, depression, and OCD, which according to his family left him debilitated and hopeless at their Cupertino home, an hour from San Francisco. For help, he had been taking medications, but his family was concerned over a recent prescription change and that he had stopped taking regular doses. The Golden Gate is a notorious destination for those looking to make the final decision and end their own lives. As the second most used suicide bridge in the world, it has had over 1,400 known jumpers since its construction in 1937. Bridge officials report an average of several hundred attempts a year, about one every other day. The last known images of Jackson come from parking lot surveillance cameras, which captured him arriving at 4:10 p.m. He exited the vehicle and crossed the parking lot towards a bus stop in the bridge's pedestrian tunnel. At that point, his image was lost. Additional surveillance cameras, specifically designed to monitor the bridge for suicide jumpers, could hold the answer in what appeared a tragically obvious outcome. To the relief of the Millers, the bridge had no footage of anyone jumping that day. Additionally, no bodies were recovered in the water. If Jackson did jump from the Golden Gate, why did he leave his car in that parking lot? Perhaps he had planned to commit suicide, but changed his mind when he arrived, a common occurrence with Golden Gate jumpers. Or he could have used the bridge's macabre reputation and parked by the Golden Gate on purpose to suggest suicide, but in fact had other intentions. Jackson's family and friends immediately became involved and cast a net across the city, searching San Francisco's youth hostels and homeless shelters. Buoying the family's belief that he was out there alive were several reported sightings of Jackson that first week in the crowded Fisherman's Wharf area. Unfortunately, the sightings were never confirmed. Despite a thorough search of the city's shelters, Jackson was never found. With no leads and no crime, the case of the young man who walked away from it all by the Golden Gate went ice cold. 4 years later, in 2014, police in Lake Tahoe received a tip from a resident who claimed to have seen Jackson several times in the South Lake Tahoe area. Police noted that the caller seemed extremely confident they had seen the missing young man, but the sightings, once again, were never confirmed, and the trail went cold. Around that time, Jackson became part of the California Five, a name given to 5 young men who had all gone missing in San Francisco between 2010 and 2013. None of the men have been found. Theories exist the cases may be related, possibly the result of a serial predator or even a cult, but no official link between the disappearances or the young men has ever been established. Since the 2014 Tahoe sighting, new information on the whereabouts of Jackson Miller has gone silent, but his mother, Gina Fernaro, remains active in keeping the search for her son alive. She's encouraged by the reported sightings of Jackson and believes he has an unforgettable smile and laugh that anyone who met him would immediately recognize. Gina asks that if you see Jackson, to not let him out of your sight and to contact authorities immediately. Had Jackson been part of a larger conspiracy to abduct young men for use in ritual and occult blood sacrifices? Or had he become overwhelmed by his mental health issues and swept into a nameless and faceless sea of homeless people who wander our nation lost in time, imprisoned in their minds? Update: Jackson Miller. March 26, 2021. Woodland, California. On March 26, 2021, in the parking lot of a Target store in Woodland, California, a city of 60,000 people about 20 miles from Sacramento and 90 miles northeast of San Francisco, a woman reported an encounter with a young man who identified himself as Jackson, while also telling her the unusual fact that he was a missing person. According to the witness, the man then asked the woman for a cigarette and a ride to Sacramento. The woman did not give the man a ride, leaving him in the Target parking lot in Woodland. When later contacted by authorities, the Target store reviewed its security camera footage from the time of the reported sighting, eventually locating the man who the woman had described from the parking lot. This image from the store's front exit shows the man who introduced himself that day in the Target parking lot as Jackson. The man was initially spotted in footage entering the store while wearing shorts, but is seen leaving Target wearing a gray or green pullover sweater and black pajama pants with shamrocks on them. The possible sighting comes 10 years after Jackson was last seen. and has renewed his family's hope that he is out there and could still come back home. His mother has expressed her feelings, as well as updating the case on the Help Find Jackson Miller Facebook page. She has asked him to reach out to her in his own way when he is ready, and that he is welcome back with open arms. As of the making of this program, there has been no report that Jackson has contacted his family, or even a confirmation that the man seen on the security camera was actually the real Jackson Miller. Due to the face mask he was wearing and the camera angle, identity experts who reviewed the video could not positively identify the man seen in the shamrock pants as Jackson. Although they commented the man in the video does bear a great resemblance to the missing young man last seen in San Francisco. Jackson would have been 31 years old at the time of the Woodland Target sighting in 2021. April 10th, 2019. Betty Alexander. 69-year-old female Betty Alexander was last seen on April 10th, 2019 at her senior apartment complex in the small town of Sullivan, Missouri. Could desperate opioid addicts be responsible for Betty's disappearance, or was this trusting and quiet woman a victim of dementia and heartbreak? Betty had moved to the Center Street apartments 4 years earlier with her husband Don, who sadly passed away around Christmas 2018, less than 4 months before she vanished. Although Betty was primarily housebound, she had a regular schedule of visitors to her apartment. This included a housekeeper, Meals on Wheels, physical therapy sessions, and deliveries from her pharmacy. Betty also spent weekends with daughter Tanya and regular Thursday evening visits with son Dave, whose wife Kathy had an uncle who lived in the same complex. On the day Betty was last seen, she received a delivery from her local pharmacy around 1:15 p.m. The delivery included, among other medications, 2 boxes of fentanyl patches, a 2-month supply. Betty used the patches for chronic back pain she had received from an accident and multiple surgeries. A few hours later, around 3 p.m., Betty was seen by her neighbor Jerry, her daughter-in-law's uncle, as she tended to some flowers directly outside her apartment. This would be the last confirmed sighting of Betty Alexander. That evening, it's thought Betty was in her apartment as the dosage of medication she took at 7 p.m. was used. She's believed to have gone missing sometime after 7 p.m. and before noon the following day. Several days later on Sunday, with no word from Betty, Tanya visited her mother's empty apartment and contacted authorities. Betty's apartment showed no signs of forced entry, robbery, or a struggle. As normal, Betty had laid out clothes for the next day. Her eyeglasses were also found on the arm of her favorite reclining chair where she would often nap. Betty's vision made it impossible to go anywhere without her glasses, so the fact they were on the recliner could be a sign she didn't plan on leaving. Sitting untouched on the counter was Betty's purse. It held her apartment key, ATM card, a wallet with $40 cash, and oddly, 2 additional envelopes, each with $100. There's no explanation for the $200 cash or why it was separated that way. Betty had not withdrawn the money from her bank account. Authorities conducted multiple searches of the area with scent and cadaver dogs, helicopters, infrared, drones, and by foot, but nothing was found. The only things missing from the apartment was a box of fentanyl patches and Betty. 3 theories on what happened. Recently diagnosed with dementia, it was first believed Betty may have become disoriented and wandered off, but according to those who knew her, the symptoms were virtually undetectable. Her physician later stated the type of dementia that she did have would not trigger her to wander off in a confused state, even if she skipped medication. Rural Missouri is unfortunately no stranger to the ravages of drug addiction and crime. In the area around Sullivan, there have been several violent cases of seniors falling prey to drug-addicted criminals. None of them have been linked to Betty. But if drugs were the motivation for Betty's disappearance, why would the addicts leave the remainder of her March fentanyl patches and the second newly delivered box untouched in the apartment? Betty was depressed from her husband's death and suffering physically and planned to take her life. Although everyone who knew her said this was doubtful, it was later revealed Betty suffered from bipolar episodes and had a history of visits to mental health facilities. A private investigator hired for the case found a witness who claimed to have seen Betty a block from her apartment around 5 p.m. the day after she disappeared. The witness claimed the woman was standing in the road across from the fire department and appeared scared and lost. The sighting was never confirmed, though, as Betty. Her family is desperate to get Betty home, so any tips, no matter how insignificant they may seem, could break this case. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Betty Alexander, please contact the Sullivan Police Department, the Missouri State Highway Patrol Missing Persons Clearinghouse, or email missingpersons@mshp.dps.mo.gov. March 24, 1998. Amy Lynn Bradley. 23-year-old female Amy Lynn Bradley was last seen on March 24, 1998, on the cruise ship Rhapsody of the Seas. A recent college graduate, Amy was on a Caribbean cruise with her father Ron, mother Iva, and brother Brad. Although Amy was a strong swimmer and lifeguard, she had been afraid to go on the cruise. In hindsight, perhaps Amy had a premonition of the terror that would unfold as her family's dream vacation descended into a nightmare. To celebrate a generous work bonus, insurance executive Ron Bradley took his suburban Virginia family to San Juan, Puerto Rico for a Caribbean cruise. The Bradleys left San Juan Saturday, March 21st, on board Royal Caribbean's Rhapsody of the Seas, bound for Aruba. Having conquered her fear of cruising, Amy had adapted to life in the high seas and was having a great time. Amy also seemed to be making an impression on the ship's waitstaff, who mentioned to her family one night at dinner they'd like to take her on shore to Aruba. Amy would later say there was no way she'd go anywhere with them and that the waiters creeped her out. On Monday evening, March 23rd, the ship left Aruba for Curacao, a Dutch island off the coast of South America. That last evening prior to her disappearance, Amy and her mother went to go look at the latest prints taken by the ship's photographers. What they found at the photo kiosk was chilling. All of Amy's photos were missing, but why and by who? The gallery operator recalled seeing Amy's pictures earlier, but had no explanation. Later that night, after the Bradley parents were in bed, Amy and Brad headed out to the ship's disco for some fun. Coincidentally, a camera crew shooting a promotional video was filming that night and captured Amy on camera in what would be her final appearance. She is seen dancing with a man later identified as Alistair Douglas, aka Yellow, a member of a ship band named Blue Orchid. Yellow stated he left Amy at 1 a.m. to return to his crew quarters, a claim that was later confirmed by investigators. Amy and Brad returned to their cabin at 3:40 a.m. and hung out for a while on the balcony before Brad went to bed. Not feeling well, Amy slept on the balcony, where she was seen still resting by her father at 5:30 a.m. Around 6, Ron was awakened by a loud noise. He noticed Amy had left the balcony and the cabin, taking cigarettes and a lighter but no shoes, indicating a quick trip back. When Amy didn't return, Ron's gut instincts leapt into action, and he began searching the ship. An hour later, a panicked Ron returned to the cabin and told his family that Amy was missing. With the entire ship about to debark onto Curacao, the Bradleys pled with the crew to wait until Amy could be located, but it proceeded as scheduled. The captain also denied the family's request to announce that Amy was missing or post photos, citing it would disturb the passengers. While the captain searched the ship, Amy's family spent all day scouring Curacao. Both efforts turned up empty-handed. As the ship's departure time approached, the Bradleys stayed on the island, praying for a miracle. The next day, the FBI contacted Ron, saying only the ship's common areas had been searched. Hopeful Amy may still be aboard, the Bradleys flew from Curacao to St. Martin and reboarded the Rhapsody. Disappointingly, both the ship and the FBI's investigation turned up nothing. For 5 days, the Dutch Antilles Coast Guard and a boat chartered by Royal Caribbean searched the waters where Amy was last seen. It was also in vain. Even interviews with crew members, including Yellow, the man seen with Amy in the video, turned up fruitless. After a polygraph test, the FBI released Yellow with no evidence to charge him in Amy's disappearance. Ron claims Yellow gave him and his friends a thumbs up after he passed the polygraph. In the absence of suspects and a body, the investigation would stall. But what did emerge were two compelling and disturbing theories on what happened to Amy Bradley. The first explanation for Amy's disappearance came from the cruise line who believed she had committed suicide. The Bradleys immediately dismissed the suggestions, citing how Amy had sent postcards, bought gifts for friends, and had a new job, apartment, and dog waiting for her back home. The idea that Amy had no reason to run away or injure herself was later supported by the FBI. With suicide taken off the table, the cruise ship and many investigators still believed it was very possible Amy had gone overboard, by accident or not. It's even been suggested Amy never made it out of the cabin, but fell overboard on her own balcony, making that noise which woke Ron up. For now though, we'll follow the official version that Amy left the cabin that morning, fully expecting to return. One highly plausible scenario is that while outside of the cabin, Amy either intentionally or unintentionally met up with someone and fell victim to an assault where she was accidentally injured or killed, with her body then being hidden or disposed of before the gangplanks dropped. Supporters of the assault explanation believe the early hours, the impending debarkation, and the known occurrences of assault aboard cruise ships would make that morning a choice time for such a predatory act. It's also possible Amy left the cabin, went on deck to take pictures, didn't encounter anyone, and fell overboard alone somewhere else on the boat. There were several witnesses who stated they saw Amy that morning, along with Yellow, the musician, in an elevator and again on the top deck, where she was drinking a dark beverage he had brought for her. Amy's brother, Brad, recalled a comment from a crew member that day, saying that he was sorry for what had happened to his sister. A weird comment considering no one at the time except Amy's family and the ship's senior staff knew she had vanished. For any missing persons case, the on-boat scenarios would be tragic enough. But this is where Amy's case gets seriously weird and creepy. Since the beginning, Amy's family has believed she was taken off the Rhapsody and brought to Curacao against her will. They further suspect some members of the ship's crew had orchestrated the entire operation, which could explain why the captain and security dragged their feet on immediate searches and refused to wait that morning until Amy was found. It has been speculated Amy was separated from the passengers, possibly drugged, and smuggled out through a cargo exit hidden inside luggage, a laundry cart, or even on board a small boat. Supporting the abduction theory are a disturbing series of sightings which began soon after Amy's disappearance and continued for years after. In August of 1998, just 5 months after Amy was last seen, 2 Canadian tourists reported seeing a young woman with identical tattoos to Amy on a Curacao beach. The Canadians reported she was with several rough-looking men who they believed prevented her from speaking to them. Years later, the man recognized Amy from an episode of America's Most Wanted and contacted her family. He says he is haunted by the encounter and knows it was her. In 1999, a sailor from the US Navy reported while at a brothel in Curacao, a young woman had come up to him and introduced herself as Amy Bradley. The woman said she was being held against her will and needed his help to escape. The sailor told her where the ship was docked, but he didn't tell authorities about Amy, fearing he would be disciplined for visiting a brothel. In 2002, after his retirement, the sailor reported the encounter, but by that time the brothel involved had been burnt to the ground. 2005, Barbados. While using a department store restroom, an American female tourist saw a young woman enter with 3 men who aggressively threatened her to not mess up a big deal that had been arranged. After the men left, the witness exited the stall to find the distraught woman hunched over the sink. The woman identified herself as Amy from Virginia. The sighting ended when the men re-entered the restroom and the witness ran out in fear. She reported the woman to authorities, and this sketch was drawn. The latest and perhaps most disturbing clue of Amy's abduction came in 2005 when the Bradleys were emailed 2 photos found on a Caribbean sex tourism website. The photos are of an escort named Jazz. It is believed the woman in the pictures could be Amy. A facial recognition expert has examined the pictures and believes that Jazz is without question Amy Bradley. Doubters of the website photos question their authenticity. Could they be photoshopped fakes in some twisted prank? Also, are the photos too old to be Amy? The website credited photos as being from 1987 to 2003. The photos of Jazz appear to have hairstyles more typical of the late 80s and early 90s, setting it well before the time Amy disappeared. Also, none of her 4 tattoos are visible. The Southern Caribbean is a known hub for human trafficking, and it is possible that Amy was victim to an inside job. But many criminal experts who have examined this case find abduction the least likely of the 2 disappearance theories. Furthermore, many experts believe an abduction would most likely happen while the victim was on the island, not from being smuggled off a cruise ship to the island, all while on a family vacation. None of the sightings have ever been confirmed as being Amy. Instead, they have become part of a succession of false starts, bringing the Bradleys no closer to uncovering the truth about what happened to their daughter. Perhaps the greatest of these false hopes came in the fall of 1999 when the Bradleys were contacted by Frank Jones, a Florida-based private investigator and former Navy SEAL, who stated he had a team of ex-soldiers who could locate Amy and rescue her from Curacao. Working with tips from a hotel cook on the island, Jones claimed Amy had been seen shopping, riding in a car, and was being held captive by heavily armed Colombian gangsters. To complete the mission, Jones requested more money from the Bradleys, now totaling close to $200,000. As the stories escalated and the Bradleys waited in Florida to pick up their daughter, a former Special Forces sniper hired by Jones realized the house he had been staking out, which Amy was allegedly held in, was bogus. The ex-soldier also realized other stories Jones had been telling the Bradleys were lies. He alerted the family, who in turn contacted authorities. Frank Jones had fabricated the entire story, including being an ex-Navy SEAL. Jones was convicted and sentenced to jail for 5 years in order to pay back the money he stole from the Bradleys. Amy was declared deceased in 1999. In 2003, her parents brought a lawsuit against Royal Caribbean for negligence and wrongful death, but lost the case. They planned an appeal. It's been over 20 years since Amy Bradley was last seen, and there's been no closure for her family. Did Amy ever make it off the Rhapsody of the Seas that morning? Or did she fall victim to foul play or an accident? Or is her fate even more horrifying? Had Amy been set up and sold into human trafficking, forced to work in captivity, and moved around the Caribbean for years after, possibly even today? In 2018, 20 years after Amy was last seen, the FBI released these time-enhanced pictures of her. There remain 3 separate rewards for the return of Amy: information on her whereabouts, or any information at all leading to her recovery. If you have a tip on the fate of Amy Lynn Bradley, contact the FBI or American Consulate, or leave an anonymous tip at tips.fbi.gov. February 1st, 2003. Matthew Mullaney. 21-year-old male Matthew Allen Mullaney was last seen on February 1st, 2003. Matthew had just begun a study abroad program in Florence, Italy, when he went out for an evening at a local pub. For many students, the opportunity to study abroad is a highlight of their college careers, a unique chance to experience another culture firsthand. But for Matthew, was it also the perfect opportunity to disappear into a new life? Graduating high school in the suburbs south of Boston, Matthew left for an unsuccessful 2-year stint at Fairfield University in Connecticut before he decided college wasn't for him. Matthew charted a new course and pursued his passion for music and art, including the opportunity to study in Europe. Matthew arrived on January 11th for a semester at the Angel Academy of Art in Florence, Italy. His enthusiasm was evident in his frequent calls home as he told his parents about the new friends he was making and how beautiful it was. Matthew was last seen Friday evening at the Lion's Fountain, an Irish pub in Florence that was popular with American and other English-speaking students. Staff reported his behavior was normal and that he spent the evening socializing with other patrons. He left around 2:30 a.m. on Saturday morning, February 1st. It's unknown if he left with a group or alone. That was the last official sighting of Matthew Mullaney. The following Monday, February 3rd, Matthew still hadn't returned to his apartment. His roommates alerted his family, who also had not heard from him, which was unusual. He had left that evening carrying only his driver's license and insurance card, leaving his passport at home. To this day, there has been no activity on Matthew's credit, phone, or ATM cards. Unconfirmed sightings of Matthew began in Florence just days after he was last seen. A pizzeria employee and a taxi driver both believe they saw the missing young man. This would not be the last time someone would claim to see Matthew Mullaney. In April 2003, 2 months after his disappearance, a Dutch national reported seeing Matthew on a train from Dover, England to London. The witness said Matthew was headed to Dublin for work. In July 2003, an Irish woman claimed to have sat next to Matthew on a ferry from Wales to Dublin. The woman stated that the man became agitated after the boat announced it would be doing an immigration check. Further sightings of Matthew would stretch into the following year. January 2004, Matthew was reportedly seen at a pub in Galway, Ireland. Less than a month later, Matthew was apparently seen by several witnesses in Bologna, Italy. The witnesses said he appeared thin and disheveled, and he claimed to be English. The last known sighting of Matthew was reported to police in late 2006 by an Irish couple who believed they had spent an afternoon with Matthew at Oscar Madison's pub in Kinsale, Ireland, a year earlier in July 2005. A photo of the missing Mullaney prompted the couple to make the tip a year later. They were convinced the man in the photo was the same Matt from Massachusetts, as he called himself, they had spoken to that previous summer. The couple also told police that Matt from Massachusetts discussed keeping a journal of his travels so he could write a book. Over the years, Matthew's parents would take several trips to Europe to search for their son, and his sister even went to study in Dublin for a year, but Matthew was never found. The Mullaney's have sent DNA samples to EU authorities, which are being shared with forensic teams across the continent, and the possibility Matthew is a John Doe. If Matthew intentionally disappeared while in Florence, why did he leave so close to the start of the term with no passport? One theory speculates he was struggling with the onset of an extreme psychiatric or physical medical condition and wanted to take care of the situation on his own. Although foul play was ruled out by police, could Matthew have been a victim of an accident on his walk home from the pub? An accident that was covered up? If Mullaney is traveling throughout Europe, he may have a beard or facial hair. He also has pierced ears. Mullaney has surgical scars on his left ankle and pins inside. Most distinctly, Matthew has a flaming shamrock tattoo in the center of his upper back. His family described him as having a gentle spirit, quick wit, and beautiful smile. Although there has been little news for well over a decade, his heartbroken family have not given up on finding their son. If you have any information on the whereabouts of Matthew Allen Mullaney, please contact his mother, Terry, the FBI Boston field office, or leave an anonymous tip online at tips.fbi.gov. December 31st, 2014. Marina Boelter. 18-year-old female Marina Boelter was last seen on New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2014, leaving work outside the IGA grocery store in Bloomfield, Indiana. It was 6 p.m. on New Year's Eve, and young mother Marina Boelter was excited for the evening ahead. She had plans to ring in the new year with an older man she had recently begun dating. But he wasn't the only guy in her life. As Marina stepped out of the IGA that evening, her ex-boyfriend and child's father was waiting in the parking lot. He would watch in shock as Marina got into a mysterious car and drove away with an unidentified man. This would be the last reported sighting of Marina Boelter. Marina had been through some rough times as a teenager, but thanks to her hard work, things were looking up. She had a new apartment and a job at the IGA. She had also completed her GED and recently been accepted to college with plans to become a pastry chef. But in the weeks before her disappearance, there were some possible signs of turbulence for the young mother. Marina's infant son was in foster care, and she had recently missed a scheduled visitation with him, something she never did, especially since she wanted to regain full custody in the future. Marina had also deleted her Facebook profile several weeks before she vanished, but she kept up another profile on a modeling website. Some have speculated the modeling site could be a clue to a double life. New Year's Eve came and went, and it was now 2015. That January 1st, the older man Marina had a date with, who happened to also be married, showed up looking for her at the IGA. She had been a no-show for the New Year's Eve party at his house and had left no explanation why. Her manager and co-workers confirmed she had also blown off work that day with no notice. One co-worker later confirmed that Marina's behavior the weeks before she went missing had left them with a bad feeling when she wasn't at work. It was then Marina was officially reported missing to authorities. Immediately, there would be two persons of interest. The first was Marina's ex and baby daddy, Douglas DJ Lockhart, age 22. It was Lockhart who reported to police that Marina had rode away from the IGA parking lot in an unknown car. Although separated, Marina and DJ apparently still had plenty of drama. Marina's stepsister Ashley later stated they had been in a fight the day she vanished, and that DJ was at the IGA parking lot in an attempt to speak with her. Although Marina's family was initially suspicious of Lockhart, most believed he was innocent in her disappearance, and his cooperation with her family and the police would clear him as a suspect. But that wouldn't be the end of the story for DJ Lockhart. The other person of interest was the unknown man who drove away with Marina in the unspecified metallic-colored Mercury Milan. Initially a mystery, police were able to identify and interview the unknown driver, although his name has been withheld. To date, the unnamed man has not been charged in Marina's disappearance, but police did unearth his unsettling rap sheet, including criminal convictions for abduction and rape. According to police, the man stated he knew Marina from work, possibly as a co-worker or customer, and was simply giving her a ride home. The man claimed Marina had requested to be dropped off at a pizzeria near her apartment to conceal her home address. The man then claims he drove off and didn't see her again. Perhaps a coincidence, investigators found the last ping to Marina's cell phone was around 6 p.m., the same time she left work and drove off with the unnamed man. Disturbingly, he wasn't the only violent ex-felon with access to Marina. A man living in her apartment building had been in prison for decades, charged with murder for the rape and torture of a young girl, which included removing her eyes and lighting her body on fire. Despite his horrific background, police did not consider him a person of interest in Marina's disappearance. On February 12, 2015, 6 weeks after Marina was last seen, a bizarre incident occurred. DJ Lockhart burst into the home of a Bloomfield man, Michael Rogers, to aggressively confront him over his past relationship with Marina and another woman, who was present with DJ at the time. Lockhart turned violent and attacked Rogers in his living room, leading to a self-defense stab wound in Lockhart's chest. Despite calling 911 and attempting first aid, the stab wound was fatal. Rogers was not charged in DJ's death, and police do not believe the incident was related to Marina's disappearance. But with Lockhart gone, also went critical information on Marina's life and what may have happened to her. In another bizarre incident, also in February 2015, just a week before Lockhart's stabbing, Indiana State Police arrested 21-year-old Danny Deckard for impersonating a police officer and driving with a suspended license. Decker had visited a home in Bloomfield, posing as an undercover narcotics officer investigating a missing persons case. A case from New Year's Eve. Although bizarre, police believe Decker has no connection to Marina's disappearance, and that he may have been using the ruse to steal the identity of the people he interviewed for his fake police investigation. So what happened to Marina Boelter? Did she ever make it home to her apartment that day? Was she the victim of a jealous ex-boyfriend? Or was she involved in another life of older men and sugar daddies that remains a secret? Or did her proximity to convicted violent felons put her in the wrong place at the wrong time? Only one thing is for sure. Marina's young son has a father who is dead and a mother who is still missing. Unfortunately, there were no security cameras at the IGA or the strip mall it was in, so police have asked the public to share any video footage from New Year's Eve 2014 of US Route 231 in or around Bloomfield, Judson Street, or Seminary Street. Marina's family and friends are still actively searching for her and working hard to keep the case alive and bring Marina home. Marina's hair may be dyed reddish brown. She has a scar on her lip, pierced ears, and a tattoo of a star with butterfly wings on her foot. She was last seen wearing denim jeans with rhinestones on the back pockets, a peacoat, Nike tennis shoes, and a cross necklace. Marina also has a purse with a picture of the Philadelphia Love statue on it. If you have any information on the disappearance of Marina Boelter, contact the Indiana State Police, the Bloomfield Police Department, or the Greene County Crime Stoppers Anonymous Tip Hotline. January 13th, 2019. Elizabeth Breck. 46-year-old female Elizabeth Breck was last seen at the Sierra Tucson Treatment Center in Saddlebrook, Arizona on January 13th, 2019. The high school teacher and mother of two had checked into the facility on January 10th for a 30-day treatment period for PTSD. 3 days later, she would vanish. Was Elizabeth a victim of her own struggles with mental health? Or did she slip through the cracks of the luxury treatment facility, dealing with its own checkered past? Or does Elizabeth's disappearance have to do with a larger and more sinister pattern, where patients at rehab facilities have been sold into human trafficking or forced into sex work? Elizabeth arrived at the Sierra Tucson Treatment Center on Thursday, January 10th, around 7 p.m. The teacher at a local magnet school had decided to check herself in for a 30-day stint of therapy for dealing with trauma and PTSD. The only information known about that evening is that Elizabeth reached out to her adult daughter to let her know that she was checking into Sierra and going to seek some help. As is customary, Breck spent the first night at the facility's intake unit, known as the Desert Flower Hospital, typically used for detox and other acute procedures, but most importantly, for observation. Intake staff determined Elizabeth was not a threat to herself or others, and was released 9 a.m. Sunday to move into the residential unit for the remainder of her stay. Later that afternoon, Elizabeth's tracking bracelet and personal belongings were found in her room, but she was nowhere to be seen. The only items missing were her driver's license and some cash from her wallet, leaving behind her cell phone, car keys, and other personal belongings. Due to a lack of security cameras at Sierra Tucson, and the fact she was not wearing her tracking bracelet, there are no verified accounts of Breck from the Sunday she disappeared. Later, a behavioral health tech from Sierra Tucson would report having seen Elizabeth on the facility's campus and approaching her, although it has not been disclosed what was said or the outcome of their interaction. That would be the last time anyone would see Elizabeth Breck. Law enforcement believe that Elizabeth left the grounds of Sierra Tucson on foot, wearing a gray shirt and skirt. Temperatures in the desert that January dropped to 30 degrees at nighttime, leaving many to believe she would have needed shelter. Sierra Tucson is located on a 160-acre campus surrounded by the mountain peaks and low, dry desert of southeast Arizona. Although the location is far from any shops or restaurants, there are houses and other structures within a mile in almost all directions, so if she was out walking on foot, it's likely she would have been seen or found by someone who worked or lived in the area. Christopher Breck, Elizabeth's brother, acknowledged that his sister had dealings with mental health in the past, but that she had never run away or failed to keep in touch. To raise money for a private detective, among other search costs, her family ran a successful GoFundMe page. Unfortunately, though, no solid leads were generated from it. Given the circumstances of Elizabeth's mental state, many suspect she simply ran off into the Arizona wilderness on her own accord, either to start a new life or possibly even in some type of passive suicide attempt. This would seem a reasonable hypothesis if it weren't for one simple fact. Elizabeth was able to legally sign herself out of Sierra Tucson, and she also had a car at the facility, so there wouldn't be any need to leave in secret or on foot. Law enforcement searched a 5-mile radius near Edwin and North Lago del Oro Parkway in Pinal County, the location that Elizabeth was alleged to have been last seen. The search turned up nothing. To this day, there has been no body found or any signs to indicate foul play. As law enforcement and family members tracked down leads for Elizabeth, things weren't adding up. Questions began to arise about the role Sierra Tucson may have played in her disappearance. Breck's family filed a complaint with the Arizona Department of Health Services alleging negligence by Sierra Tucson. The family questioned why Breck was not wearing her Bluetooth-style patient tracking bracelet, which was later found destroyed, and also why Breck was moved into the residential wing before she had completed the facility's standard 72-hour intake period. Sierra Tucson is no stranger to controversy. State of Arizona DHS records indicate a pattern of fines against Sierra Tucson spanning back several years before Breck came there for treatment. In 2019, just 4 months after Elizabeth was last seen, the New Jersey family of Steve Joe, 20 years old, was awarded a $5 million settlement against Sierra Tucson for his wrongful death in 2014. Joe was in treatment for drug rehab and mental health issues and died from a fatal intoxication of drugs only 6 days after checking in. The lawsuit accused Sierra Tucson of medical negligence for, among other things, not following up on Joe's suicidal thoughts he had expressed during intake. Since 2014, 3 other patients had also been found dead at Sierra Tucson. One was a retired medical doctor whose body was found 2 weeks after he disappeared in some bushes on the facility's property. Unfortunately, it was too decomposed to determine the cause of death. Several journalists who have investigated Acadia Healthcare Company, which owns Sierra Tucson, have suggested that declining revenue at the facilities may have led to cost-cutting procedures, which may have led to shortages of qualified staff and improperly maintained facilities. Acadia has been alleged to have been actively dismantling its on-site camera security at other treatment facilities, as shown in this court filing. The for-profit rehab industry in the U.S. has recently come under scrutiny due to a lack of industry regulation and the exorbitant fees they can charge. In fact, questions were raised about how Elizabeth could afford the $30,000 for 30-day treatment at Sierra Tucson, since she was only using her private insurance. In recent years, private insurers have been footing less of the bill at luxury rehab centers, and government programs have slashed reimbursements. Elements Behavioral Health, parent company of the Promises Luxury Rehab Centers, which once treated celebrities like Britney Spears, Lindsay Lohan, and Charlie Sheen, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in 2018 amid ongoing lawsuits alleging insurance fraud and mismanagement. But something more sinister has also emerged from the rehab world in the past few years. In 2017, reports surfaced in Florida about abuses at a chain of drug treatment centers which were actively luring addicts to live at their facilities, even supplying drugs, all in order to charge insurance companies for excessive urine tests and other procedures. If that wasn't bad enough, addicts were also subject to violent abuse, extortion, scams, some even being forced into the sex trade. There were also reports of facilities in Florida trading addicts to other corrupted facilities in elaborate human trafficking schemes. In 2018, an FBI investigation led to the arrest and imprisonment of a husband and wife team, Ken and Laura Chapman, for insurance fraud, money laundering, and sex trafficking. Although the Chapmans' life of crime has ended for now, they were likely not the only people running behavioral health centers who abused the vulnerable people they were entrusted to care for. It is important to note that as of the making of this program, Acadia and Sierra Tucson have not been accused of any of this predatory behavior at any of its treatment facilities, but that doesn't rule out that there may have been some rogue employees working there who may have been tapped into this underworld. Could it be one of them had a connection to do something with Elizabeth? January of 2021 marked the 2-year anniversary that Elizabeth Breck was last seen. Her family observed the occasion with a somber reflection that she may not be coming back, and a commitment to celebrating the life that she had lived. So what did happen to Elizabeth Breck? Did her mental state push her to the extremes of running away to start a new life, or even suicide? Or does the facility, Sierra Tucson, know more than it's letting on? Was she the victim of their negligence? Or worse, was she trafficked by a corrupt staff member into a criminal underworld? Or is Elizabeth alive somewhere, possibly abducted by someone who lives in the area, or someone who was traveling through that Sunday? Breck's disappearance remains an open case, and although there has been a lack of leads, it doesn't mean the answers aren't out there. If you have any information about the whereabouts of Elizabeth Breck, no matter how small or insignificant you may think it is, please reach out to the Pinal County Sheriff's Office at 520-866-5111.